Ephyra was a prosperous and dazzling city. In its crowded streets, merchants shouted to advertise exotic goods. It was known throughout Asia for its tapestries, fabrics, spices, and livestock that filled its markets. From the edges of the known world, caravans of traders visited it, trusting the solvency of its merchants. The city bustled with feverish activity. Temples, plazas, and arrow-straight streets were being built. Neighborhoods thrived like anthills, and its granaries were always full. People flocked en masse to places of worship as well as to brothels. When the royal procession passed, the city fell silent, and everyone bowed before King Sisyphus, who ruled with intelligence but also with an iron fist. Sisyphus was a wicked tyrant. Power, as always, corrupts, and those who wield it tend to believe they are immortal and that others exist to serve them as mere tools. That was him, a cunning tyrant. He had seduced his niece and from time to time killed his guests to demonstrate his power. This violation of the sacred tradition of hospitality enraged the gods, who believed they alone had the right to break the rules without consequence. One day, Zeus, king of the gods, while spying on beautiful maidens from behind some bushes, became infatuated with the nymph Aegina. Despite his advances, Aegina, shy and elusive, rejected the god. So Zeus decided to transform into an eagle and abduct her, taking her to the dome of the heavens. The nymph's father, Asopo, god of rivers, followed the eagle's shadow as it wound through ravines and plains. After days of futile pursuit, he arrived at Ephyra, where he was received by King Sisyphus. Sisyphus, known for his cunning, promised Asopo he would make a spring emerge in the city in exchange for information about the whereabouts of his daughter Aegina. However, Zeus learned of the agreement and, enraged, ordered Thanatos, the god of death, to chain Sisyphus in the underworld for all eternity. Thanatos managed to capture Sisyphus, but the cunning king feigned curiosity about the mechanism of the chains, pulleys, and locks that trapped souls. True to his wit, Sisyphus managed to chain Thanatos himself and fled back to the world of the living, leaving the god imprisoned in the earth's depths. This act had unexpected consequences. With Thanatos captive, no one could die on earth. The streets of Ephyra were filled with agonizing elders, the sick begging for death, and wounded people who bled endlessly. This particularly enraged Ares, god of war, for whom battles without deaths were meaningless. Ares traveled to the underworld and freed Thanatos, who immediately sought revenge on Sisyphus. When Sisyphus realized that people with unsettled accounts with death were dying en masse around him, he deduced that someone had freed Thanatos. Knowing his days were numbered, his cunning outweighed his fear, and he devised a plan with his wife, Merope. Just before dying, he asked her to throw his body into the public square, where it was trampled and desecrated by the vassals. They dragged it with ropes and abandoned it at the very edge of the Styx lagoon, the border of the underworld, reduced to a sack of broken flesh and bones barely resembling a human form. In this deplorable state, Sisyphus arrived in the underworld and sought Persephone, the goddess of the underworld. He lamented that his wife had dishonored him without a proper funeral and asked to return to the world of the living to punish her. Persephone, moved by his words, allowed him to return with the promise that he would return to the underworld once he had completed his task. But Sisyphus, true to his nature, broke his promise and remained among the living, mocking the gods once again. It was to be expected that Sisyphus would break his promise, mocking the gods once again and escaping death for the second time. Because once free, he wasted no time indulging in the pleasures of the world. He roamed the coasts, letting the scent of salt fill his lungs, and delighted in contemplating the infinite curves of the Gulf. He savoured grilled fish, took refuge under the shade of fig trees, and succumbed to the delights of the flesh. Long feasts by the stream, accompanied by the murmur of the water, were his refuge from the eternity that awaited him. However, Sisyphus was unwilling to return voluntarily. Eventually, it was Hermes, the divine messenger, who captured him and brought him back to face judgment for his audacity. The gods deliberated on the appropriate punishment for his insolence. They considered terrible sentences, a beast devouring his entrails, the discordant songs of 1,000 sirens piercing his ears, eternal hunger, or being dismembered and reconstructed repeatedly in endless suffering. But in the end, they agreed that there is no greater torment for a human being than the endless repetition of a purposeless task. Neither physical pain, isolation, nor humiliation compares to the emptiness of eternal work devoid of hope or reward. Thus, they decided his punishment. Sisyphus was to push a giant boulder uphill on a slope, a monumental task that would drain every ounce of his strength. And just as he was about to reach the summit, the boulder would fall back down, forcing him to start over. And so it would be, over and over, for all eternity. Millennia have passed since his condemnation, and historians have interpreted the myth as an allegory of the eternal cycles of nature, like sunrise and sunset, repeating without pause. But it is also a metaphor for our human condition, that endless effort that seems to have neither end nor purpose. Think about your daily life. The work you finish today begins again tomorrow. The dishes you clean reappear in the sink. The fallen leaves you sweep return the next day. The reports you send today come back tomorrow with adjustments. Even the advice you repeat 100 times disappears into a mysterious black hole. Human existence, in essence, seems like a struggle against the ephemeral. However, perhaps the true absurdity lies not in the task itself, but in our inability to see it with new eyes. The philosopher Albert Camus dedicated much of his life to understanding the absurdity of human existence, using the metaphor of Sisyphus's punishment to reflect the perpetual search for meaning and truth in an indifferent and purposeless universe. Camus, however, moves away from the image of a defeated Sisyphus. Instead, he imagines this mythological hero facing his fate with courage, descending the hill with determination to push the rock back up to the summit. For Camus, Sisyphus is not condemned because, although life's struggles are absurd and repetitive, they gain meaning when we make them our own. Sisyphus, by embracing his destiny, silently rebels against the gods, finding in the struggle toward the heights a purpose that fills his heart. From the divine perspective, watching Sisyphus push his rock might seem like a cruel punishment, but for Camus, he is happy. His happiness lies in accepting his task, in finding meaning in the effort. When he is in the valley, Sisyphus clings to the hope of reaching the top, and upon reaching the summit, he can look back with pride. The ultimate fate of the rock does not matter. What matters is the effort invested in bringing it there. Happiness, as Camus reminds us, is fleeting. No moment of joy or sorrow lasts forever. The best we can hope for is to savor flashes of bliss and try to shorten periods of anguish. There is no light without shadow, no happiness without the absurdity of the world. Both are born from the same human condition. Each time Sisyphus brushes the summit, he experiences a moment of pride and satisfaction. And when the rock falls, he chooses not to give up. Instead of succumbing to despair, he descends and begins again. Why do we carry on even in our darkest days? Why do we wake after a perfect day knowing nothing will be the same as the day before? Because, like Sisyphus, we are connected to a story that transcends time. In the last 100 years, the figure of Sisyphus has become more relevant. The idea that work can be a source of pleasure rather than a painful necessity is recent. And paradoxically, this conception has brought with it frustration. It was prosperity that led us to question whether pushing our rock was worth it. Today, we face a world with infinite career options, plunging us into a paradox of choice. In pre-industrial times, professions were inherited and vocation was non-existent. Now, we are pressured to discover our purpose at ages when we barely understand the world, and this expectation often leaves us disillusioned. Think of his proud smile at the top of the mountain when the stone was about to fall under its own weight. Think of the vast views he witnessed, the breeze that caressed his skin, the dazzling sunset he enjoyed moments before the rock fell again. You have a home, perhaps the laughter of your children, food on the table. You can shower whenever you like and treat yourself to a delicious dessert, the understanding gaze of your partner, a weekend that draws nearer every day, a soft bed, and the immense curiosity about what tomorrow will bring. Do you truly think you could aspire to more? If you didn't choose your profession or didn't achieve the goals you imagined in the solitude of your room, you have not failed. All of humanity shares that destiny. When you endure an exhausting day, deal with tyrannical bosses or endless tasks. When your body and mind feel at their limit, think of Sisyphus. Think of his silent rebellion. Think of his proud smile at the top of the mountain when the stone was about to fall under its own weight. Think of the vast views he witnessed, the breeze that caressed his skin, the dazzling sunset he enjoyed moments before the rock fell again. Remember the small pleasures of your life: a warm home, the laughter of your children, a hot shower, the complicit gaze of your partner, or the promise of a nearby weekend. Perhaps you don't need more than that. Maybe, like Sisyphus, you can find pride and meaning in the simple act of continuing to push your rock. Do you truly think you could aspire to more?